That's everything I've got for you guys. Thanks.
So thank you so much. So it's very, very clear and interesting. And so the floor is open for questions, feedback. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is really, really wonderful. Like, I'm really interested in translanguaging and kind of like it's really wonderful that I could see that you have seen using multilingual writing strategies in one of the contexts, like where the students were using Spanish words. I was just wondering that how these strategies can be used in a context where the languages do not use English script. Like, for example, I could see that the student wrote the word Mexico with an accent.
Yeah.
Like, and they use different spelling, you know. But if I'm using, like, I'm from Bangladesh, and when I use Bengali script, it's very different. You know how, like, it's kind of like, I really would like to see that how the Bengali script could be used, you know?
Or the Chinese script, or the Japanese script, or the Korean script, or Nigerian script, or whatever. Linguistic distance and graphemes are different, right? Yeah. Okay, it's very linguistic. You're an educational linguist. You're well positioned to answer. Question.
I haven't, except for in my courses at UNCG, in research I haven't worked within that. So I think what we've worked with more are people who know languages that don't generally have a written system, and they kind of like are doing that. But at UNCG, so we have a lot of students from China, and there'll be in their notes and in their conversation. So not with me, I don't speak Mandarin, but in classes they'll switch between Mandarin and English and quite easily. And I see also in their notes going back and forth, but they also will use pinyin,
some hot tea for you.
Oh, thank you. As well. When I work with teacher educator or in teacher education, mostly I just am trying to get teachers to be okay with students using scripts they don't know or languages they don't know. In particular, the script thing I think causes a little, or brings up more anxiety than just languages they don't know in general. There are some, so the video that I was going to show you all, there's a video from the CUNY NICEB Resource Consortium on how to teach bilinguals even when you're not one. And one of them has a teacher doing graphic novels with students that speak a lot of different varieties of Chinese. And so the students write in Chinese and in English in preparation for their final project. So those are good examples, but I
think the answer is in your PhD thesis.
Yeah.
Thesis. And then come to present on our research channel. Any questions?
Yeah, I kind of have a question. So I noticed in one of your slides, you've demonstrated a rubric. I was wondering if you can possibly pull up that slide again.
Yes.
Because I see there's a section called multilingualism.
Yeah.
Right. So, and multilingualism, that will count like 30%, and I see like the evidence of authors' full linguistic repertoire for ZPD. So I was wondering, could you elaborate a little bit first how this section, this 30%, was actually carried out in the grading process?
Okay, so this was highly controversial. So this was to full disclosure, this is the rubric we used together in class, and then they created their own rubrics too. So out of all of the projects that students created, I want to say, this is a while ago that we coded it, I want to say just 2 also included something like multilingualism in their own rubrics. No, we were still not sure how to assess. multilingualism. Since this time, like you can see right now, it's very all over the place, like in terms of what counts as multilingualism, giving them credit for being multilingual in their writing. Okay, so it's tricky because it's trying not to do anything in terms of a scale. And I think like the seed was planted in our work in that class that I'm still trying to figure out right now in terms of multilingual. So I work with testers on the construct of multilingualism in language testing. How do you measure multilingualism? And usually people will then look to a proficiency scale. And this is trying to not do that, right? It's just trying, and assigning the weight is always arbitrary, right? Like when you create a rubric and you're matching it with objectives, you decide as a teacher how much of the grade. So we could have had that be 5%. We could have had it be 50%. But you can see it would be word choice. So maybe, sometimes when a student will write a word that doesn't quite translate well or doesn't quite have the same collocation that they maybe think it does in the usage. So we, instead of calling that a collocation error, we'd say that's evidence of multilingualism. And it was really reframing these ideas of interference as evidence of multilingualism. Does that make sense?
Yes. And can I have a follow-up question?
Please.
It is. I see the idea how multilingualism, like being put in the assessment, would actually play a role. It's kind of and also including translanguaging. It could be very can be a transformative social action. But I was also wondering, the way that is like putting English monolingualism or speaking the perfect English has been as a dominant discourse for quite a while. It already has some consequences. I can set an example. I recently had a student who was supposed to be able to speak Mandarin, but both herself and her mother were strongly against the idea of me speaking any Chinese with her. So I was wondering, if she were to take a test, it would be very possible and likely that she's going to just act like a monolingual English speaker, and she would try to do that in the test as well. I'm not saying this is correct, but it is already the reality that a lot of people have been doing this already. So if they were now faced with a multilingual way of assessment, would you consider this could also be an extra burden for maybe students who are already used to what the dominant discourse would be?
Yeah, so we asked students for the study where we found the difference between the tests. We asked them their opinions about the test. And a lot of the way the test was designed, you had to be bilingual in order to complete the test. But some students, one student wrote, "This test made me translate, and I'm not skilled at translation, and so it was much harder than if it would have been in English only." So I think that that's completely true. Like, there are ways of being bilingual where some people's ideas of translanguaging, like, it just does not fit with their bilingual practices, in particular in very formal educational situations. When we do this in collaboration, it's still not 100% buy-in. And it still comes with its limitations, just like all assessments do. And acknowledging that, like, this isn't, now we've solved assessment with translanguaging, that there's still problems and issues, and it's still not a model for everyone. Does that? Yeah.
That's another PhD thesis.
Yeah.
Because I think there's still a lot of research that we need to do, because otherwise, I've said this again and again, every movement has its beginning and its end. And people might just jump onto the bandwagon without contributing back to the theory and practice. So we are all asked to do the research, to contribute to the theories and the practices. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and Guadalupe Valdez and Constant Learn have an article that just came out in Modern Language Journal this year, where they really do kind of track and critique how translanguaging, some of the history is ignored about this already being a topic that has been part of pedagogy for a long time, but also about people going so far with it where they're just kind of imposing it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, we can't impose any methodology.
Yeah.
And it has to be suited to one's own individual context. That's why research is so important in this area. Any other questions? Feedback? Comments? Yes?
One question. One thing that stood out to me the most is that how understanding of translanguaging expands into not just like you're limited to code switching, but it's more of relation making and relation accomplishing. But one thing that I am still trying to figure it out is how the benefits of bilingualism. You mentioned about the benefits of bilingualism, and then the example that you showed in the tweets, I think, and let me know if you have any questions, and then the people's faces ahead. And then when it comes to the Spanish, then they smile. To me, it's an example of how translanguaging gets done, or how the co-accomplishments of the translanguaging to get the work done. So what in that situation is that they wanted to make sure that if you have any questions, ask me. So that's the task in that situation. And by doing translanguaging, they accomplish the task. So there is a slippery, to me, that the benefits of bilingualism often coincides with economic benefits, economic purposes, achieving the economic benefits of doing, or achieving the social benefits of our economy. And I don't know how this notion can get away or be incorporated with this. To me, it sometimes often coincides with very much notion of production-oriented neoliberal ideology of current economy, which again will not be separable with the colonial histories again. So I don't know how this notion can be separated or be played juggling or dancing around, or and I still don't know how to have that answer for that. So.
Yeah, I don't know either. The work we've been doing is really locally based, and the idea of scaling it up for capitalist gain doesn't make sense to me. Also, I don't think that anything that we've been doing could be. Like the idea of trying to standardize or participate in that level of a system with this work doesn't make sense. I am trying to, I told you, I've got a friend who's a psychometrician, and I'm trying to talk with him about, like, are there any ways that these things are reconcilable? But when the motivations and aims, right, are to claim bilingualism based on what this test has said about your bilingualism in order to get access to a job, I don't know what to do about those feelings, about those general, like, ideologies around what is valuable bilingualism and what is not valuable bilingualism. This is trying to find ways to make some spaces for bilingualism and multilingualism that's not attached with or not directly connected with neoliberal ideas of what success means. But reframing success in general, like within the field of education, is really, that's a...
Yeah, that's a question I always come back to Hilary Jenks, the access paradox, and how she tried to deal with it. We try to provide access to the dominant languages or registers or codes, but at the same time we try to raise critical awareness and positioning. We know that we need to pass the IELTS, pass the TOEFL, or do this and do that in order to get into this program, get this job and that. But we also try to raise critical awareness that this is not intrinsically superior to other resources.
Yeah.
So that is what Sunny Lau and Saskia still saying, becoming critical linguistic ethnographers with our students.
Yeah.
Look at that video on our channel. Becoming critical linguistic ethnographers with our students.
Yeah.
So that we raise critical awareness. At the same time, we also try to give access. Try to facilitate access to the dominant codes.
But it also means, so this is something Mario and I talk a lot about, it also means in terms of our work and how we position ourselves, like we're so comfortable in university, we're so like as people in education, we of course value education, but it's not for everyone. Like going in and getting degrees, like I talk about my mom like very briefly at the beginning, right? Like my mom did the thing. She's supposed to get a college degree to get a job, get a career. That didn't happen. That happens to a lot of people. And then there are people that don't go to school and they're fine, they're happy, right? Like maybe they do make money, they don't make money, they don't measure it by money.
Nowadays, we have more options.
But even like, so like some of the communities that I've been working with in Peru, right? Like this push to move from the rural to the urban, right? And make a lot of sacrifices when maybe they were just happy. like that's the bigger picture of how this connects with coloniality.
But it's for them to judge.
Yeah, it's not
for us to say,
exactly.
we're happy without this IELTS, without this TOEFL. Okay? It's for you to judge for yourself. Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm here to facilitate and to also raise awareness that this is not the only option.
Yeah, there are systems and structures that we're all playing into, that we're all benefiting from, right? That we're also criticizing.
We're all implicated.
Yeah. And I don't know. We just are in these really tense spaces that at least acknowledging them and naming them is part of it. Yeah.
And I don't want to have guilty feelings. We are all playing the game, but we collude with resistance. I always say collusion with resistance. Otherwise, I will die of feeling guilty, or I'll die of not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right? It's not either or.
Right.
We have to play the game, but we have to resist the game. You cannot just opt out, or you cannot just be die-hard revolutionary. I don't know. This is my position right now. Collusion with resistance.
I like that.
Any comments? Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not a language student, but I came here because I'm interested in the transformative and anti-oppressive purpose of translanguaging. And these critical transformative perspectives are appealing theoretically, but usually the difficulty comes when we put it in practice, in actual classroom and testing practices. And the last point in your presentation is addressing institutional barriers or issues in order to dismantle these practices.
Yeah.
I can see the importance of translanguaging from the perspective of the students, but my concern is how that could be from the perspective of the teachers. You might have overcome some of the challenges because your work is collaborative work with others, but how can a monolingual teacher overcome the challenges that might just appear when the students start translanguaging? For example, in this university, no one speaks my language. So how can I practice translanguaging in my learning and testing?
Yeah. So I don't have it. I have some slides after this. So I do this thing in terms of just only focusing on relationship building and not forcing translanguaging, right? So I've done very simple activities like introduction name tags, and these are with students that are largely not multilingual backgrounds. But I do ask them, like, we're in a language class, like, teach me something about language, and just creating these small spaces where it's about everyone having dynamic linguistic practices. So what they do, right, is they find these other ways of communicating. And then when they do have other languages that they maybe were not known to be shared, they come up. And it's really, I don't know, like as an instructor, I create named spaces where this can happen. But again, it's not top down, it's not forced, like you must. Because I've done that before. You have to teach me a word in a different language, and some of the students are panicking because they don't know, and other students are felt really put on the spot, right? It helps that in the work in Oaxaca, for example, talking a lot about your indigenous identity or indigenous languages is actually not something that's a general discourse. They've built up more of a culture in the Faculty of Languages where it's a little bit more comfortable of a topic. But a lot of people will just deny it. Or they'll say, oh, I understand some, but I actually don't know. I don't know that language. And so slowly, little by little, instead of just telling people, but your grandpa speaks this, don't you know this? Or telling them what their identity is, right? Like creating these times and spaces for it to come up and doing like the long game versus, like I'm showing you like targeted activities, right? But really it's about setting up a culture and again, building these relationships so that people just start to expect it.
Yeah, I totally agree. We don't want to set up these identity categories that if you look at them, oh, you're Chinese, you must speak this language or that language. This is setting up a very stereotypical category to impose on our students here. Just one example from Hong Kong. I worked with a science teacher, biology teacher in Hong Kong. She doesn't speak the languages of the ethnic minoritized students. They are Pakistani students. So the science teacher was teaching herbivores, omnivores, carnivores, and trying to say, can you give me an example of herbivores? And then some students say camels. Then this Hong Kong teacher, because in Hong Kong you never see a camel running around, right? So this Hong Kong teacher say, camel, is it a herbivore? Then the students, of course, and then they say, ungs is the Urdu word for camels. And then the teacher doesn't speak the language of the students, but the teacher, ungs? Oh, okay. So the teacher suddenly, using this Japanese manga gesture, sweating. Oh, I learned something, okay? So you don't need to speak the language or languages of your students, but you acknowledge that at times your students have more cultural knowledge or knowledge about the world. Camel, of course, this is a herbivore, but this Hong Kong biology teacher, camel? So this is allowing a space for the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, cultural knowledge, linguistic knowledge, and then the teacher learns, the teacher learns to say this word in the student's language. So this is one example of how a monolingual teacher can work with students whose community languages the teacher doesn't speak.
Yeah. But it takes, and from the teacher perspective, like you do have some idea of how to set up some cultural norms in the class, and that really can help.
Yeah, some cultural expectations that your cultural resources, your knowledges
the same way
legitimate.
Yeah, the same way teachers also police language and say, don't speak that in this classroom, don't mix languages.
Yeah, this is an English-only classroom.
Yeah.
But yes, all these are very valid, practical questions. And I feel that when it is not English, people are much more open-minded. When you are doing Japanese immersion or Chinese immersion, French immersion, people are much more open-minded. When it is English, then English only, okay? It has to do with what you just said, the dominance, the ideological domination of English globally.
Yeah, and the teacher, Julio, that we work with in Oaxaca, sorry, Julio, he still teaches primarily English only, right? So after we finish this project, we're not working on projects in his classes anymore, and I asked him, like, are you doing this with your tests or anything? And he said no, because it was, so we were doing it collaboratively, which meant I did work, he did work, and he's like, I don't have the time. He's like, I know how to make a test in English only that quickly. And I have all those materials, so I just do that. It's much faster and more efficient.
Yeah. So we also
and it's valued.
Yeah. We also that means we all need to do more work.
Yeah.
Research and assessment, research in curriculum material development, research in classroom pedagogies, classroom interaction patterns. And there's a lot of work to do. Yeah. There's a lot of PhD theses to be written.
Yeah. Doing things that are not the status quo, right, is just going to take a lot more.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, so thank you so much. We will have one more live event with Jamie on Friday, 6 p.m. Vancouver time or Californian time, and that is this Friday. So we can ask questions, even more questions. Let's put our hands together again for Jamie, Dr. Shishana. Thank you very much.
Thank you.